Hey, good morning. My name is Lance French. I'm the Business Development Manager for W&M Environmental, a division of Braun Intertech, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on fire stopping, small efforts with big results. Our expert for today is Braun's Eric Bergman. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please send them through your chat tab on your GoToWebinar window. If we don't get to your question, I'll make sure that Eric sees them and we'll get an answer to you as soon as possible. We are recording this webinar and it will be available to rewatch on our website probably tomorrow along with the slides, and I'll send you an email with a link when they are made available. So I want to, first I want to start off by introducing our expert on fire stopping today, Eric. So Eric's been with Firestop construction for 15 years. He's been in general construction for the last 25 years. So you've been around.
I've
some
done a few things.
Yeah. And then he manages all fire stopping inspections in all markets, and that includes the world.
Yeah. Right. Anywhere where Braun goes, I'll go.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Well, we're really excited. I've been really excited about this webinar for a long time.
It's cool.
It's kind of fascinating because,
stuff.
you know, when I first heard it there was some confusion, and we'll kind of go into that where, you know, what's the difference, and we'll kind of go over that. But it's fire stopping. Well, of course you want to stop fires, right?
Right.
So anyway, so what's the leading killer in fire? So obviously.
The fire is the basis of it, but that creates the smoke and toxic gas, and that's the leading killer. It's, you know, fire kills people, but smoke and toxic gas kills the bulk of them.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of the importance of why we're talking about this today.
Yeah. You know, through proper fire stopping, you stop the spread of flame and smoke and toxic gas, and that's an important thing nowadays.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, the smoke, you can see the smoke in most cases.
Well, yeah. So there's some statistics out there, and you know, there's a little bit of variation, but the general consensus is in the heat of a fire, and if you're an occupant in a building that's on fire, your average distance that you can see in that building is 12 feet. So it's very, very short amount of time in a building fire for it to totally be engulfed in smoke to the point where you can't really navigate where you need to go. So
right.
The whole theory and design, but beside, you know, around fire stop is to stop that spread.
Yeah, and the toxic gas, and you know, I didn't even really think about that when we started, but I mean, generally you probably can't see that.
Yeah,
hardly.
Well, yeah, a lot of times you can. I mean, pretty much anything that's toxic that burns in a building, you're going to be able to see some variation of it. The challenge is once you inhale a portion of it and your eyes start watering, you're going to have a hard time navigating or seeing anything, and by that point, it's, you know, a challenge to get out of the building. So get back to the basis of what we do is we try to fire stop a building to give the occupant ample time to get out in the event of a fire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start off with some basic, because I want to educate our audience, and basically you're educating me. So, okay, so if you can, at the end of this, if I know some things at the end of this, then we've done our job right.
There you go.
Okay. So what exactly is fire stopping?
Well, it's a passive fire protection that is installed in openings in rated assemblies to create the actual rated assembly. So, for instance, joints and penetrations going through the rated assembly have to be sealed to a fire stop application that has been tested by a laboratory. So, some of the major misconceptions of fire stopping is a lot of people confuse it with fireproofing. Now, the difference between those two is pretty substantial. It's, you know, from our standpoint, they're two separate trades, they're two separate things, and fireproofing is, I guess, generalized more with the coating of a structural member to maintain its integrity in the event of a fire, and fire stopping is the sealing of rated assemblies to stop the spread of fire and smoke.
So layman's terms is we make sure that there's no cracks that can have the smoke escape to other rooms.
Yeah.
So you can,
well, building fires are interesting because they expand the air pressure inside a room. So if a room is closed off and a fire breaks out, it the air inside expands, so it tries to drive itself out through any opening in the room.
Yeah,
So,
I've seen that cool scene on, I think, what's that?
Backdraft.
Backdraft, yeah, with
a little bit different of a thing, but
all right,
you know, if
still
you
a
think
cool
about the
movie.
fundamental concept of a hot air balloon, right? You heat the air up inside a balloon, the balloon expands, and you create lift. The same thing in a building. You heat the air up, it expands. If there's toxic gas in that air that's being expanded, it's going to drive out through any opening in there and spread through the building.
Okay, so how are the Firestop applications designed?
So there's several manufacturers that invest a lot into their fire stopping product lines, and those products they manufacture are then assembled into an assembly they believe will pass the testing requirements set forth by an ASTM standard, and that is verified by a third-party testing laboratory. So in layman's terms, it's not a fire stop until one of the third-party testing laboratories have accredited it and passed it and given it its own indicator or number. You know, every laboratory has their own numbering system. The most widely used one is UL's inventory of Firestop applications. It's hard to actually get a exact count of them, but there's somewhere in the 12 to 15,000 listed assemblies that are in circulation right now. So
there's not just a one stop.
No, there's plenty of options, and you know,
we're talking about the red goo.
We are talking about that being one component of an assembly. It's not so much red goo. It's the red sealant. We like to call it sealant. We don't try to call it goo, but we like to.
What's the technical word for it?
Yeah, Firestop sealant.
Okay, Firestop sealant.
Yeah, so that's used. There might be 5 components to that: mineral wool backing, the size of the opening, the penetrating item, the wall assembly. All those things make up the Firestop.
And maybe what's in the room could determine
how that Firestop application gets assembled or gets selected, right? Selection of the Firestop application is probably the hardest part because most people generalize it as being, put some red stuff in that hole and call it Firestop. But
I guess we shouldn't call it red goo because I'm sure there's other colors of goo that we can use.
There are.
Right?
Yeah, there's multiple colors.
Okay, very good. All right.
We like to term it as a UL listed assembly. So
UL listed assembly.
The generic term that can be surmised as the system, the UL system. It's listed by UL, and there's a detail. It's easy to find. The market has a really good way of delivering those systems to anybody that really needs them. You just have to look a little bit, and you'll be able to find pretty much any system for any application. And if not, then every manufacturer has a really good engineering staff that can produce engineering judgments. Those are maybe one-off applications outside of a listed assembly, and there's really not too many AHJs or building officials in the country that won't accept a manufacturer's engineering judgment, and we'll inspect to that. So yeah.
And you need to know all. Did you say 12,000?
12 to 15. I mean, they all say, well, we got 5,000 in circulation.
So you need to be current on all your.
It's sometimes it's a challenge to select them,
sealants.
But yeah, you do. Yeah, and there could be one sealant, like one of their backbone products that has 500 applications for it, whether it's a plastic pipe or a metal pipe or a copper pipe or an HVAC duct or whatever. You could still use the same sealant, but it has to be tested for whatever that application is. So I have to challenge with Firestopping is selecting the right system and providing the right paperwork for the job. And that's, something we help with in the inspection process according to the standard. I think we'll talk about that a little bit, but. So long story short, third-party testing labs, UL, Intertech, Southwest Research Institute, or FM approvals are third-party Firestop testing laboratories that will test Firestop applications. Most of the bigger manufacturers have their own in-house testing facilities, their own furnaces to burn these samples, and they'll just have UL sit in on the test at their facility.
So a third company, so a company makes the goo, or what's it called?
Firestop sealant.
Firestop sealant.
Mm-hmm. So manufacturer makes the product,
and then they have to send it to one of these guys to get
tested. Yep. And then once it's tested, then they can sell that system as installable to the standard. Okay. So then a contractor would say, well, I can use that system in this application on my building. So they'll get the paperwork of that system, and they'll look at the detail of how that needs to be installed, and they'll source their materials from said manufacturer and install it to that system, that paperwork that they have, and then we'll come in and inspect to that paperwork.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the systems itself.
Yep. So generalizing the Firestop systems, we kind of split them into 4 major components in through penetrations, and those are pipes or ducts or cables or going through walls or floors. There's membrane penetrations. Those are kind of a tricky one, and maybe a little misunderstood in the market. They're like switch boxes or outlet boxes in a wall, or healthcare facilities have a lot of them where they'll put electrical panels in rated walls or gas valves. Any opening that only pierces half the membrane is a membrane penetration. Joint systems, that's pretty straightforward. It's any joint that is created by building assemblies to dissimilar materials. So, for instance, a gypsum wall that runs up and the top of it tops out at a fluted deck, poured concrete floor, ceiling assembly, or a gypsum wall diving into a masonry or CMU wall. Those all need proper Firestop application selected and installed for them. And then perimeter fire barrier systems are any slab edge details where a slab runs out to a curtain wall of some sort, or stud frame wall. Any opening in the slab has to be protected with a listed Firestop assembly.
Okay. So what does Braun do? And so
that's a great question.
Yeah.
What we do lots of stuff. Braun is a cool company that has many layers. The layer that I'm responsible for is the Firestopping component, and with respect to that, what we do is provide a code required third-party inspection on the installed Firestops of the project.
So Braun doesn't actually put in the sealant.
No.
Okay.
Yep.
So basically, we're just talking, making sure.
We're just talking
inspections.
Inspections of it being installed properly. There's checks and balances in the code and the standards that require no overlap between manufacturer, installer, inspector, and so on and so forth. So, we're completely divested from any installer or manufacturer, and we're a true third-party inspector.
Okay. So we're pre-work and post-work.
Yeah. Pre-work to the instance that we offer consulting services to help general contractors and owners get in front of their submittals and what systems they're going to need and how that workflow needs to happen with respect to Firestop. And then, pre-work, not so much. The standards that we'll talk about in a little bit require us to pretty much be on site throughout the course of the whole project.
The post-work.
The post-work. Yeah. So, so pre-work, yes, from the consulting standpoint, as work, being on site through the course of the whole thing, and then post-work, we'll finalize the project out, do all our finish, closeout inspections, and then issue final reports.
So you're there as they're doing it, not necessarily a day after they did it.
Right. And there's several options based on the standard. We'll get into that a little bit, but there's options that the contractors have. It's not so strict that it says you have to do it exactly this way. There's options in the inspection.
Okay. And do the contractors doing the work, do they do the inspections too, or
no,
you can't inspect yourself?
Right. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That's actually good.
It is very good.
So
they've been doing that for a long time, right? So that's one of the reasons why the code's here now for.
So if you're doing the work, then it's by definition you're going to need it to be inspected.
Yeah, and that depends on the project there again, right? So we get into the code requiring the inspection. It's relatively new. It's section 170516 of the 2012 IBC, and in Texas we operate on 2012 and 2015, and I don't know that there's any municipalities yet that have adopted 18, but it won't be long. In the next couple of years, the whole market here will be.
So what you're saying is that we're going off codes from 7 years ago.
Yeah, which is normal. I mean, most municipalities will have to be within 2 code revisions. So if it's 2016, they'll be operating on 12 or some variation of it. And every jurisdiction can kind of adopt their own, and some states just adopt their own. And like Minnesota, for instance, has their own code, their Minnesota State Building Code, and it's a variation of 2012's IBC. But a lot of Texas municipalities will just adopt the International Building Code.
Okay.
for
So
design.
I get okay. So we're going to go into what type of facilities will require an inspection, but so if you're building, that's just for the inspection. But that's inspection? But does all buildings need
Absolutely.
fireproofing?
Firestopping. Yep. Absolutely.
Stopping. See, I did it.
We're
I
going to
didn't
get
mean
you.
to.
We're going to get you straightened out. So yeah, fireproofing, fire stopping. But yes, the requirement for fire stopping has been there since I think the first code required it in the early 80s. Back.
So the building that they're building across the street, they're going to need some fire.
Yes.
They need fire stopping.
If there is a rated
building
assembly,
the building.
Yep.
Before they can get their occupancy, if you will, they need to make sure that that's.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the challenge, so the requirement's there. If there's a rated assembly, it's not truly rated until it's fire stop. That's the last component of building.
But they still need to be inspected.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the code requires special inspections on certain buildings, not all of them.
Okay.
So, my opinion, I wish that somebody would adopt the code requiring it in all of them, but I'm out selling inspection services, so
you'd be busy.
I would, yeah. I'm busy right now, but it's good. Yeah. So 1705.16 of the 2012 IBC is where we first saw the requirement, and it goes on to say that special inspections need to happen per 2 ASTM standards for penetration fire stop and construction joint fire stop. It says that only facilities that are high rise or risk category 3 or risk category 4 are required to have third-party fire stop inspection services on them. So it's limited to a high-rise building that's 75 feet above, the lowest fire department access or grade, basically. Risk category 3, facilities similar to hospitals with emergency rooms, fire rescue police stations. Those are risk category 4s, emergency, shelters for earthquakes, any power stations or towers or like airport traffic control towers, any of that stuff. Risk category 3s, public assemblies that are 300 people or greater, schools 250 and up. Occupancy has quite a bit to do with risk categorying out a smaller building, if you will. But generally speaking, what we like to say is if outside of a sticked frame, like 3B or 5B building, there's a pretty good chance that inspections are going to be required if somebody sleeps in that facility overnight. So that's just a kind of general trigger for us. If we see a project like that or a healthcare facility that, that's getting built, we look at those.
So an apartment building that may not have 300 people, but people are going to spending the night overnight, that's going to need an inspection.
Well, and that's the gray area, right? So if it's a residential stick frame building, unless it's 500 occupant load, does not require it now.
Really?
Yeah. Which is, it's crazy. There's codes in place that will be, when they're adopted, that will require those, but we're not operating on that yet. So in the future, we'll have to inspect those, but not just yet.
Okay, I do have a question from our audience. If you have a second. Okay, so it says, what if my medical center has a surgery center in it?
Yes, it would actually category out as a 4, as a risk category 4, if there is a surgery center. So there's some outpatients facilities that do have surgery centers in them, and those would RC out at a 4.
So if it was just a medical center, it would be what, a category 3?
Yeah, or 2. I mean, some of them are 2. Yeah, if it's just exam rooms, and I mean, it all depends on how the architect designed the building. So ultimately, the safest approach is to go back if you're in question and it's not showing up on the SI form, or you're getting asked about it, but you're not sure if you require it. Go back to your architect. If it's a high rise, a risk category 3 or 4, then you can bet you're going to have to provide the inspections. But we're also in a growing stage with this new code too, and so there's some projects that slip through the cracks, and the building official doesn't ask for the inspection on it. But more often than not, we're getting calls from customers going, well, I just saw this special inspection form that has fire stopping on it, and you guys said you're going to provide that service, or it needs to be provided by the a request from the AHJ or building official. So can you help us out?
Okay, so I'm going to get in the weeds here probably a little bit, and if I'm too far, just say, yeah, let's not talk about that. Okay. So have you ever had a situation where a building is completed and they didn't know that it needed to be fire stopped, and then we're kind of doing it after the fact? And is that a? It's
a challenge. And
so that is a thing.
Yes, it is a thing. It is a thing now where projects will get built and the inspection slipped through the cracks. The AHJ sees it on a SI form and expects the reports to show up. and they don't, and it never gets picked up until the end when they're closing the project out, try to CO it, and the inspector goes, well, where's your special inspection form for Firestop? And oops, we don't have it. So now we have to go in, and it's a big challenge. And more often than not, the work's not installed the best. So the challenge not only is to go back in at pretty much an existing facility, a building that's ready to be turned over, and start opening it up and looking as not good.
We could probably go along. How long would that take? It depends. I know it depends on the thing, but we're talking months, or
there's projects we've been on where it's been 3 months of going in and repairing full time. 6 or 8 guys. There's projects where I've been personally involved with where we've had to put full time inspectors on for 7 or 8 weeks with just chasing 6 or 8 guys.
So in that situation, is it just overlooked, or the architect didn't know, or they didn't know the rule?
Yeah, a lot of it is misinstalled product, or not Firestop applications that are installed properly, and and when the inspection gets called, if it gets called late, it's hard. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing when you're growing, and the contractors call right off the bat. We get them in queue. We start helping them through the pre-con stage and get submittals together and getting, making sure their life safety drawings and everything are up to date and ready to rock. It's an easy thing.
So that's what my next question was going to be is, how does the inspection happen? Are you hired by the construction company? Are you hired by the architect? Are you hired by the building owner? How does that go?
Well, there's a little bit of gray area there. Ideally, with zero conflict, we'd be hired by the owner as an owner's representative to go in and provide that third party. Sometimes, it's not unusual for us to be hired by a general contractor. A lot of times we try not to be hired by that general contractor if they're performing that scope of work. If their subs are, then it's a little clear, it's a little more clear with not having any conflict there. But we certainly don't want to be inspecting our customers' work because there's conflict there.
So have you ever been on a inspection where they started the work and you go, I can already tell you right now that's the wrong sealant
Oh yeah.
So
that happens more often than not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's undereducated. And that's one thing we're doing on the front end of our services is trying to get out and talk to all of our customers, any potential customers and potential new customers, and educate them on what that means and try to eliminate any of that.
So they're going to, really, they're going to, if they are required to have an inspection, they would absolutely want you there before the work starts, because then if it's wrong, then they have to take it all out.
Yeah, you would think so. Yeah,
that happens.
It does. It happens,
gosh.
And it still happens where we come in late to the game, and we just, the nature of the standards and how we have to perform the inspections pretty much requires us, once the first piece of Firestop material starts going in, we need to be there on site to witness it. So that's usually really early on, especially with the development of cast-in-place devices that are getting poured into concrete floors early on in the project. It's a challenge. So, we try to do the best we can to reach out initially. If we have a project, we do multiple things on a project. So the beauty of Braun is that we're on site early, and having said that, we're, at the soil stage of that project. We're at the beginning, foundation design stage. And if we can get into the project, then usually we have no problems. We just get through and run right in. And
if you're there early enough, especially if we do the consulting side of it, then you can already kind of take these barriers out of the way, because you're going to know exactly what sealant you're going to need, or what you're going to need, what color goo. Yeah,
UL system.
Your UL system.
Firestop sealant and UL system.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we should go into some inspection requirements now.
Yeah. So, ASTM 2174 and 2393. I got a question for you.
This is the fun part.
Yeah.
We got to talk about some.
Do you know the difference between a joint and penetration?
Okay, first of all, we need to work on your wording a lot there. But I think I'm going to refuse to answer it based on HR requirements. But
so anyway, the 2174 summary is basically this: it's a penetration Firestop inspection standard, and that says several things. The bulk of what it says is that for inspection of penetrations on the project as a whole, that each system needs to be witnessed 10% as being installed, or destructive tested of 2%, in addition to visually verifying that all of them have been installed. So there's options. We talked about it a little bit earlier. There's options for the contractor to say, do we want an inspector to be here while our guys are installing this product, or if we feel like they're doing a relatively good job installing it, maybe we just get everything done and have that inspector come in once at the end of the project and do destructive testing on everything. The 2393 standard for construction joints is slightly different in the quantities, but the theory is still the same. You witness as installed or post-install with destructive testing. So the challenge there for the contractor is, do we try to address it ahead of time? So if the contractor doesn't feel like their installing contractors are going to be that strong with installing those, a lot of them elect to just have us on site for 10% to witness 10%. If you have a strong Firestop contractor that's on the job, a lot of general contractors will build relationships with certain companies that do only Firestop installations, and a lot of those jobs they'll elect to do a 2% destructive test because they know they're ultimately going to have very little issues with installing the work properly. The challenge with the inspections is, once you fail one, you double that inspection, and then once you double it again, then the inspection's over, and the intent of the standard is that the work's all removed and reinstalled properly, and the inspection's recalled. When projects get to that stage, they're ugly. They're a huge financial burden for everybody. The schedule's totally messed up. It's not good. So we try to get in early enough and eliminate that.
So you're talking about penetration inspection. I mean, are we talking about walls?
Floors and walls.
Floors and walls. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. Floors, and then joints are at the actual where the two come together.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So, or turn a corner, or stop in the roof ceiling assembly, or a perimeter. So if you have a big building that has glass on the whole facade of it,
that would be okay.
Where perimeter Firestop applications will be where those floor slabs tie into that glass wall on the inside. So we have to keep fire from spreading up the inside of the exterior wall in buildings.
Okay, so inspections, you're looking at it, but I mean, is there any technology? Do you guys, any equipment that you guys use? Or
well, there's a whole qualification program for Firestop inspectors we've gone through, and it's pretty cool. It's there's multiple levels of it, but we kind of stepped back and said, well, what are all the qualifications for Firestop inspectors and inspection companies? And we try to assemble every market that we work in. We operate in a lot of markets, so we tried to say, well, let's develop one qualification standard for ourselves as Braun that will exceed any written or published standard that would potentially remove any option for an AHJ or building official to not approve us as qualified. So we did that, and long story short, there's several out there. The IFC is the major component now that is in existence for Firestop inspectors, and they have a certificate program where after the knowledge base is acquired, that inspector can go take a test. And the test is pretty substantial. It's a difficult test. Not a lot of people pass it on the first round. But all of we are up to 16, I believe 16 or 17.
Did you pass on the first round?
I did.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I did. And we had quite a few guys that did too. We invested a substantial amount of money in a training program right off the start to try to get everybody lined up with what the standard needs to be. And they did. They showed up, they learned, and they went back and they're using all that in the field right now. It's really cool. It's cool where the inspection service is going for Braun.
Okay. I do have a follow-up question for the medical center question that we had earlier.
Okay.
So does the surgery center only need fire stopping if they put people to sleep? And I think they don't mean actually put them to sleep. They get anesthesia.
We're talking about a vet clinic?
Yeah. So in general, anesthesia or moderate sedation.
No. Well, there again, there's gray area in that whole code. So in the event that there is any question, the best thing to do for that customer is to refer back to the architect of record and cross that with the AHJ and get the AHJ's approval on it. So
who's HJ?
The authority having jurisdiction, or building official.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Hopefully that answered.
I hope so.
Our question.
Yeah. I'm not trying to duck around it, but there's gray area in it all. So it's just something that is best suited to run up through the chain and get everybody's opinion on it. And ultimately the building official makes the final determination.
Okay. And so after you've done your inspections, you finish the job, what happens next? I mean, do they get a report? Do they get a certificate? Do they get like a gold star?
Yeah,
Or
so
what do they get?
our reporting procedure is pretty cool. We, like our inspectors that are on site, will report any deficiencies or any installed product properly. They'll download with the general contractor and or the owner on their way leaving the job. So they do that verbally, and then we try to within 24 hours turn the reports around. It's a bit of a challenge sometimes based on the schedule. So we usually say between 1 to 2 days we'll have your reports back to you. And that report will basically show that inspection for the day. And then upon completion of the project and closeout of any discrepancy reports, we will issue a final report. And that final report's what the building official will usually use to close out or CO that project.
And so, okay, and now who's looking at these reports? The actual authority?
Authority having jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yep. So that will be the final report. That's what they're after for closeout. And that final report, is a summation of all the daily reports that we write that say we inspected this per the 2 ASTM standards, 2174 and 2393.
Okay. And I guess if we're going to say this is too much, what are they looking for? Are they just looking for that, yes, you're qualified, and that, yes, you did all the tests?
Well, usually what we do ahead of time is supply a qualification statement showing what our qualifications are. And like I said, we've kind of taken the minimum standard or the maximum standard in the industry and exceeded that. So we've never been questioned on qualifications.
Sure. And it is generally does each municipality have different authorities? Like, is it the fire marshal sometimes, or is it,
Yeah, well, usually on the fire marshal doesn't really get involved until the maintenance side of the building. So it's usually the code official, the building official or building inspector. That process has to go through the city for approval, and then, the issue of the CO.
Gotcha.
So.
Okay.
That's kind of the long and short of the new construction inspection services that we offer. Those are all geared around the two standards that we talked about. But what we do offer as well is the barrier management services for existing facilities, and that's where we get into fire marshals and any life safety or maintenance code, IFC or NFPA 101, or any audit third-party accreditation company or barrier audit company like the Joint Commission or CMS or Department of Health. We'll go into existing facilities. The beauty of it is based on the standard for education of new construction inspections, or the 2 ASTM standard inspection education requirements. Those are a direct tool for being very, very effective in inspecting existing barriers. If a guy knows how to look at Firestop applications that are being installed new, he's going to know how to look at them from the maintenance standpoint. And so we use a lot of that same personnel, crossing over to the maintenance world. And that program it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty effective too. There's facilities out there that have challenges with, the healthcare facilities. They're never static. They're always growing. They're always moving. There's always, contractors in there doing new stuff, poking new holes in walls, and, making this opening here and this opening there. And very seldom do they actually go back and truly fire stop it, because there's no inspection required on most of it, right?
Wow.
So if they pull a new permit and there's a new build or an addition, then there's new construction inspections that are going to have to occur or be code required for that.
So if you're doing a remodel of a 10-story building, and you're putting on, let's say you're redoing the bottom floor, whatever.
Right.
And so there's codes that you have to, resubmit the fire stopping, or is that part of it, or is it
that's the challenge, right? Is if it's existing, does it fall under an existing code? If it's new construction, it doesn't need to be inspected. And so you get into those situations where you really have to, ultimately you want the facility to be, safe, but there's a huge financial burden to a project if nobody took into consideration existing fire stops that weren't up to code. So a lot of times you get into it, and what we try to do is bring it to everybody's attention and say, here's what we observed. We're inspectors. We got in there and we said, hey, this is what we saw. Tell us what you would like. If it's existing and you don't want to address it now, you plan to address it later, then, by all means do it that way. But if you want to get it up to code now, it's a perfect opportunity. So we put it back on the customer.
So that's the biggest difference what we're talking about now compared to what we were talking about before. What we were talking about before is new construction.
Yes.
Pre-turnover,
right?
Turnover,
Yeah,
right.
when the building code authority is still governing the building.
Yeah, and then barrier management is, hey, after the fact and
after the facility's occupied.
Yeah, occupied.
Yeah, and through the life cycle of that facility, I mean, if any facility, it's always growing, it's always changing. You're moving something here, moving something there, putting in new power here, or changing this, changing that, and fire stopping is one of the last components that's ever addressed when that maintenance side happens. But when you are trying to have your facility accredited by a third party, it's a challenge, because that's always part of survey reviews, is how is your fire stopping and your barrier management performed.
I'm sure that a lot of times their answer is, well, we have sprinklers.
Yeah, well,
we have sprinklers.
We could talk about that for days and days.
And that's prevention.
Yeah.
That's fire prevention.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. So,
okay.
There's lots of codes. There's no code right now requiring that maintenance facilities, have third-party inspections on any of their existing fire stops. There's some codes coming down the line that will be adopted here in the next code cycle or two that will require that facility to invest a lot more time into their barriers with respect to fire stop. And we have programs in place to help those facilities. And the sooner they get on board, the easier transition it is. So, when we're in front of them, we always try to chat with them about what those new codes coming out are, and try to, say, hey, if we start this program now, it's going to save you this much, when that code cycle actually gets adopted. Some of them, jump right on board, and some of them are like, yeah, well, we think we'll just wait till next year or whatever. And, we try to present all the options and help that facility best we can.
So I'm full of questions right now. So how long does this, the red goo or the UL listed assembly?
Yeah, there you go.
How long does that usually last?
Well, there's really no longevity to it. It's if maintenance properly, will last the lifetime of the building in most cases. And there again, there's upwards of 12 to 15,000 systems in circulation. So depending on what's it's installed, how it was installed, if it was designed properly, meaning if there's movement built into it, and the system selection off the start was installed properly, then the fire stop application is good as the life of the building.
Okay, so I guess that brings me to my next question is, are there any guidelines or inspecting after the initial, after it's initially inspected? So what I mean is, how do you know if the building moved, and now that there's a big crack in your UL listed assembly?
There you go.
And so, but because that kind of defeats the purpose of having it, right? If it
passes the initial new construction inspection, but it doesn't last the lifetime of the building, it's useless. It's not
right. So what I'm asking is there a fail safe that's like, hey, in a year we're going to come back and we're going to take a look and make sure, or is that the building maintenance?
Building maintenance usually drives that, and
okay.
Usually their building specification will mandate that. Most of the higher end facilities that operate in this country adopt that as their standard program. Today, in most of the markets we operate in, it is not code required. So
they don't even need the license to even know what they're really
looking for. I mean, they still lock a lot of that up through specifications, right? And that's another challenge too, is that it might not be code required, but it might be spec driven. So you need to look at that too. But the long and short is there's codes coming down that are going to require maintenance fire stop inspections yearly, but they're not implemented yet in the markets we operate in. But most of those facilities that we would be servicing anyway have the same requirement spec'd. So we're offering the service as saying, hey guys, whether it's code required or not, you need it. You guys, you see you need it, you have it spec'd on your project. Let's help you do that. And how can we help you better to do that?
Yeah, because I would imagine that, if the building moves or whatever, and you have a crack where it doesn't, that's not doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, and there's two things. There's maintenance of the existing, fire stop applications, and then there's addressing new construction in an existing facility. There's the telecom contractor who's running new lines and just, takes a hammer and whacks a hole in a rated wall and passes cable through it, and then just takes off and continues with his cable and never readdresses that new opening they put in that rated assembly. So that's part of the service that we work in tandem with, inspecting existing fire stop applications and making sure that anything new is addressed properly. we try to do that too in tandem with any of their auditing agencies, or do it on a yearly cycle that would, prevent any long-term problems to not be addressed. So ideally, when stuff works right and we're in that facility, we're doing quarterly reviews on their barriers, or sometimes what we'll do is take like a 10% look at their barriers and say, based on the 10% we looked at, these are the issues. Or there's very few facilities that don't have any issues. It's just the nature of the beast, especially with healthcare facilities. So some of the third-party accreditation companies, the Joint Commission, CMS, Department of Health, there's a bunch of other ones, OSHPA, there's so many different agencies that a facility has to, or potentially might have to, communicate with to keep whatever program they put in place, to keep it in place, that require their barriers to be current and caught up, and that, we're here to help do that. So.
Very good. Okay, so these are some of the things that you do right now. So you do consulting and inspection. So you want to go through some of this list here real quick?
Yeah, so the Firestopping inspections are pretty straightforward. One of the challenges, especially with the way the standard's written, is that, if an inspector is on site witnessing 10% of that system being installed, and let's just pretend that it starts to get installed properly, and that inspector addresses the installation with the installer and says, hey, your system says this and what you're doing is that, and we can't. What it does is it bridges the gap of us being a consultant. And nowhere do we want to ever come in and say we're going to educate or teach you how to do this and inspect it, because it bridges that gap of that we don't want to push. We don't want to have inspectors that consult or educate on how to install. They're trained to be inspectors. The programs we put them through make them really good inspectors. They don't make them good installers. But as Braun, we offer a package of consulting. We just label it consulting, but that's where we have our installers, or people that have been trained, or their life cycle of their employment has been in the installations of Firestop. So we'll bring those guys in, and we'll act as consultants on the project, and we'll help out with project design, we'll help out with system selection, submittals. That's a big thing, making sure that the submittals for the project are properly selected for those applications. A lot of times architects will do that, but even still, there's architects out there, there's a lot of them that, still are trying to learn, they're trying to get experience with this. And, a lot of times there's not time to wait on Firestop selection for that project to continue. The design package has to get done and get in. So, we'll aid in that too from the consulting standpoint. And then, when the project starts moving forward and getting installed, then our inspectors step in. We don't have our consultants do any inspections, and we don't have our inspectors do any consulting. That's one thing we try to keep separate.
All right, so finally we got to talk about the project, the project. So for everybody who doesn't know, that the Texas Rangers are getting a new stadium that is opening next year. And it's going to be, it has the retractable roof, and you can see on the crane they're actually putting up would that be considered a truss? I mean, a little truss. And so
it's on a track.
I don't know if it's so this is going to be high speed, and the main reason is hopefully is so we can get better pitching.
Better pitching,
because who wants to pitch when it's 105 degrees outside? So really that's the main reason. But so tell me about the project.
It's really cool. It's a big project, as you guys know. Everything's big in Texas, but I like this crane. This crane is my favorite part of the whole project, but I'm kind of a weirdo like that. But so stadiums are interesting things, especially ones with roofs on them. And the amount of holes that go into floor assemblies in a stadium is huge. If you think about how many restrooms are in there, and how many restaurants or food style operations are in there. There's a lot of holes in that building.
Suites and
everything. Yeah, suites and the whole 9 yards. So, and the challenge is when a fire breaks out in a stadium, it's usually at max load. I mean, really, there's not too many. I guess the opportunity for a fire to break out is greater when the facility's occupied. So fire stopping is a major thing in there to make sure that the egress pathways are protected and that fire can't spread, or we can minimize fire spread as much as we can in a building like that. And, they've done a really good job with designing this building, and the smoke control systems in it are state of the art and second to none. And, for us to be able to be a part of this team to build this, we're really fortunate. It's a really cool project, and it's getting built really well.
And did you guys have, were you both consult and inspection on this one?
Yes, we do. We have full-time inspectors that are on site, and then we offer consulting on it as well. And it's obviously a lot less on the consulting side than the inspection side. But we offer, we're under contract with both facets there. So.
Okay, so I have two questions on this one. Are you going there today?
I am. Yeah. Okay. You want to go with me?
I was going to. This one. Can I go with you?
I thought your next one was going to be: Are we getting tickets out of this?
That is actually your third question. Yeah. Do we get tickets?
Everybody asks me that. Can we get a box?
Actually,
I wish.
Yeah, I'm sure some way we will, but I don't think they'll be given to us. No. I think we'll be. Yeah. So we'll be asked. So that is a. If anybody has been by it, it's going to be a phenomenal facility. It has the Texas Live right there. That's open right now. They're building. I guess they just started building the hotel.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, you can see it there, but the plans are going forward. So, okay. So you wanted me to put up this picture at the very end and if everybody remembers, it was from the very beginning of.
Yeah.
So
we'll just talk about it a little bit. It's a stick frame building that sits on top of a podium deck. We see them everywhere. The code right now presently doesn't require inspections on these buildings as long as they're not over 500 occupants.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Which is the bulk of these projects.
Or a hospital.
Yeah.
Or medical facility.
Right. They, you're learning. You're doing
I'm
awesome,
doing things.
Yeah. But what do we call it instead of red goop?
UL assisted assembly.
Listed assembly. Yep, absolutely. Or fire stop sealant.
I like goo much better.
Yeah, or red
the red goo.
Pookie or whatever. Yeah. Everybody has their own name for it. But yeah, so here shortly in the next code revision or two, depending on your market and where you're at, the occupant load for these stick frame facilities was reduced to 250. So they'll either be architects will start moving and cutting these buildings up a little bit more, or we'll start doing inspection services on these. Currently, we don't have to, or the code doesn't require it. But occasionally owners will drive their architects to spec the inspection, especially when they start realizing the cost savings with doing it properly in the event of a fire. And it's
really hard to tell if that is actually a new build or new construction or pre-existing.
It's just it's kind of amazing to see a big, huge building like that has flames pouring out of it. I mean, it's a cool picture.
And it looks like it's already collapsed, too. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
hope nobody was in
somebody needed your advice on this one. I'm just saying. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Eric, thanks for joining us. Great.
I enjoyed chatting with you today.
Yeah, great information. I learned a lot.
Good.
And because that was what triggered me wanting to do this webinars, fire stopping, and what's the difference between, that was my first question. What's the difference between fire stopping, fire protection,
fireproofing, fire alarms, fire everything.
Yeah. So, but if anybody has any questions that they want to send to Eric, or have a project that they want to start on, or some advice on fire stopping, there's his contact information. He'd be more than happy to answer your question. And our next webinar is in July. Can't believe we're in July already, but it's going to be contaminated site closure strategies. So, and our experts are going to be Frank Clark and Clay Schneider. So register for that one on our website soon. So, well, Eric, thanks for coming down all the way from Minnesota, and gosh, leaving Minnesota at the end of June. That's not great.
It's hot this week in there. It's like 95.
Oh, good.
I know 95.
Well, all right. Well, hey, everybody, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Have a great one.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.